Welcome, Elaine Lawson. The applause will be inaudible because they're all muted. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. So as you know, I'm going to be talking about the arts and crafts movement in America, which flourished between 1890 and 1910. And in the time we have, it's like 45 minutes, I'd like to try and give you a general idea of what it was about and how it manifested here in America. But I'd like to start where it began, in England. But to understand what the arts and crafts movement is, we need first to understand what it is not. What it is not is a specific style, and what it is, or at least what it started as, was an idea, a philosophy, a reaction. And what was it a reaction against? We can say it was against industrialization. But having said that, an arts and crafts item is not a specific style, as for instance with Art Nouveau or Art Deco. We will see that within this larger movement, there are recognizable styles, and that it is possible to look at objects, furniture, pottery, metalwork, and architecture, and say that they belong in the arts and crafts category. But to repeat, there's not one uniformity of style. Not unlike Art Nouveau, which was to follow, the arts and crafts movement was a reaction to Victorian excess. But unlike Art Nouveau, it had deep social undertones and aimed to defend the skilled craftsman against mass-produced, machine-driven industry. This movement started in England in the late Victorian period, the end of the 19th century. England at that time was the most industrialized country in the world. The Industrial Revolution had resulted in the almost universally accepted idea that objects were created by machine, and this had resulted in a devaluation of the individual worker. This new movement emphasized handwork over mass production, and it emphasized simplicity of design, in contrast to the over-decorated Victorian excesses in furniture and in manufactured objects. Two people were instrumental in England in leading a revolution against this trend. They were the socialist philosopher and art critic John Ruskin and the socialist artist William Morris. Ruskin advocated honest craftsmanship and quality materials, and he was instrumental in suggesting that craftsmen form guilds and work together. And this was the philosophy that was adopted here in America. William Morris was the other person whose ideas most closely influenced the movement. Ruskin was the philosopher, and Morris put it into practice. William Morris also believed that industrialization had alienated labor and created a dehumanizing distance between the designer and the manufacturer. He worked to translate Ruskin's theories. Oh, sorry. Jack, turn the phone off. Sorry. He worked to translate Ruskin's theory into reality. But today I'm going to concentrate on the form this movement took in America. Grounded in socialist political theory, the movement emphasized the value of the craftsman over the machine, but distinguished itself particularly in two ways from the English movement. One, in the extremely important architectural form it took here. Two, in the acceptance of the necessity to use machinery where necessary to create a more sophisticated product. So let's start with architecture. The fact is that these new architects working with this philosophy believed that the interior of the home, the furniture and other details were just as important as the exterior. Some of the terms you'll hear to describe this architecture in America are craftsman style, prairie style, as with Frank Lloyd Wright, and bungalow style. There was a great emphasis in America on creating well-decorated middle-class homes, claiming that this would make society more harmonious. So what had been the architectural styles in America prior to the introduction of the arts and crafts movement? And I'm talking about the 19th century up until the 1880s. And I'm talking individual styles that together come into the category of Victorian architecture. So first we have what's called the Gothic Revival. This is, as you see, the William Roach House in New Bedford, Mass. Features here are pointed arches, towers, steep gabled roof. Then you might recognize this, the Mark Twain House in Hartford, typically steeply pitched roof and an asymmetrical bay window layout. Then we have Romanesque Revival. Here, most have towers, often with conical roofs and round-topped arches over windows. And you may recognize this one, the Graves Gilman House on Hill House Avenue. This is comes into the category of Italianate, and it features overhanging, low-pitched roof, barely discernible from the ground, tall, narrow first-floor windows. And here we have the Skinner and Trowbridge House on Hill House Avenue, which comes into the category of Greek Revival, featuring a symmetrical shape, columns, a porch entry, and plain or highly decorated cornices and friezes. Chimneys were placed way back to make the home look more like a Greek temple. And finally, the John Schwab House, which is on Prospect Street in New Haven. Tudor Revival, characterized by steeply pitched roofs, elaborate masonry, chimneys, embellished doorways, and decorative half timbering. And we have the Carson Mansion in Eureka, California, Queen Anne style, which incidentally, to quote, is considered, believe it or not, one of the grandest Victorian homes in America, now a private club. So Queen Anne architecture is often noted for its ornamental excesses, including turrets, wrought iron spindles on every possible surface. Perhaps, I think you would agree, pretty overdone. And the American Victorian house and all these come into this category, typically took the form of a two-story. Everything that comes into this category it was a two-story square house, basically. And it was emphasis on this style that architects Frank Lloyd Wright and Green, among others, rebelled against so strongly. So a more natural form of architecture was evolving in the US. And it took several forms and several different names. But the ideas behind them were universal. And that was an emphasis on using materials suitable to the location and making the house more conducive to family living in a very welcoming space. So now we're talking about the beginning of the arts and crafts movement. And first we have what became known as shingle style. And this term originated with our own Vincent Scully from the Yale School of Architecture. This was in many ways the more basic Queen Anne style, but with simpler exterior and mostly covered with wood shingles. And in many ways, it was a transitional style to the two styles that are synonymous with the arts and crafts movement in architecture, bungalow style and prairie style. Henry Hobson Richardson in Boston is credited with developing this style, shingle style, and used it for most of his country and suburban houses, mostly in the Northeast of the country, the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest. You may know Richardson from Trinity Church in Boston. Here we have both the Queen Anne style and the shingle style. Note the basic similarities between the two. The roofs that are prominent and complex, house shapes that are similar, but the shingle on the right is more horizontal, has fewer contrasting materials, and it's basically one color and covered in wood shingles, a much simpler look. This is showing a more unified whole than the complex features of the Queen Anne style too. And the houses were covered on the exterior with wood, obviously to take advantage of the large amount of wood that are available here in New England, whereas in the mid-Atlantic and Midwestern states, these simple square homes were more likely to be constructed of brick. So styles of architecture that fall within the category of arts and crafts have various names and different styles. As well as shingle style, we have California bungalow style, craftsman style, and prairie style, but they all incorporate similar interior features, such as open floor plans, beamed ceilings, lots of woodwork and windows, stained and leaded glass, built-in bookcases, and usually a fireplace. And the overall effect was open. The dark wood and simple hearth conveyed coziness, while the many windows flooded the rooms in natural light. One of the earliest manifestations of the new style was the bungalow. And the term originated in India, meaning house in the Bengal style. These houses were traditionally small, only one story, and detached, and had a wide veranda. In Britain, it initially had high status and exotic connotations. But when it showed up in America, especially in England, it was different. But it was its development in Southern California that paved the way for its role as a year-round house and turned it into the most popular house style America had ever known. So what was the bungalow style? It's a specific design based on the philosophy of the arts and crafts movement. Gustav Stickley, who I'll talk about in a minute, in his Craftsman magazine, described it like this. It's a house reduced to its simplest form, one that never fails to harmonize with its surroundings because its low, broad proportions and absolute lack of ornamentation give it a character so natural and unaffected that it seems to blend with any landscape. He added, it should be built of any local material, so it is never expensive. It is beautiful because it is planned and built to meet simple needs. And this is how it was originally conceived, although we'll see that it does later evolve into something grander and much more luxurious. So at the beginning, Sears Roebuck agreed with this philosophy and did its part to spread the bungalow gospel by offering several models in its mail order catalogs. They provided the pre-cut lumber, the nails, the doors, and all the other components, and shipped it all to the building site. The change in American domestic architecture of the period is traceable not only to changes in taste and style, but also to the shift from upper to middle class patronage. The socioeconomic group, the middle class, was less likely to have live-in domestic servants, more likely to be involved in the housework and looking after the children. So now we see the kitchen integrated into the main house, easy access to the backyard and a dining area closer to the kitchen. Cobblestones, which you see there, rough stones with uneven surfaces, were used in foundations and chimneys, while the rest of the home was often constructed of wood or shingles, usually in a natural shade, and there was a great deal of outdoor space, consisting of a broad front porch and often a rear patio, and the front door usually opened directly into the living room, which often connected to the dining room. In other words, what we know as open plan, and we take it for granted, but it was revolutionary at the turn of the century. So welcome to Green and Green, two brothers from California who were the major proponents of a more luxurious form of this style that came to be known as the ultimate bungalow. And having said that bungalows were designed with the middle class in mind, with Green and Green, things changed. They were designing custom houses for a very wealthy clientele. However, the basic philosophy was the same. The house should have a sympathetic relationship to its site and it choose materials to the environment where it was built. Their houses were completely custom affairs, where all the interior components, including light fixtures and furniture, were created for specific spaces in the home. In fact, their ultimate bungalows were generally considered among the finest, if not the finest, examples of residential architecture in the US. And I'm going to talk about 3 of their houses. Firstly, we have the Gamble House, built in Pasadena in about 1909. A home for David Gamble of the Procter & Gamble Company. This house is often described as America's arts and crafts masterpiece. Its style shows a basic simplicity with geometric rather than curvy lines and a certain California spaciousness, reflecting available land and a year-round pleasant climate. As well as designing the houses, Green & Green designed the furniture and fixtures that went into them. Rooms in the Gamble House were built using multiple kinds of wood. This is unlike other arts and craft designers that were mostly using oak. And the woods, the low and horizontal shapes, and the natural light that filters through the art glass exterior windows coexist with a relatively traditional plan in which most rooms are regularly shaped. And here you see the fireplace of the Gamble House, which was often a very important feature of the houses. The dining room, we see the fireplace and the overhead light designed specifically for the house. And here we have the front hall and stairs of the Gamble House. In 1966, the Gamble heirs turned the house over to the city of Pasadena, and the house was declared a National Historic Landmark. So let's get to 2 other Green & Green dwellings. This is the Blacker House, a house designed in 1907, also in Pasadena for Robert and Nellie Blacker. Everything in this house was custom designed, down to the teak keyhole cover. The stairs in the Blacker House, you can see the importance of the woodwork and the detail that went into the walls and stairs. Unfortunately, when Nellie Blacker died, although she had specified that the house and belongings should remain intact, it didn't happen. To maximize the value of the estate, everything was sold off separately by her heirs, and much of the furniture, it's unbelievable, went into a yard sale. So that's what has come to be called the rape of the Blacker House. Since then, the new owners and the Preservation Trust of the City of Pasadena have undertaken a massive restoration of this fantastic house. And this is what it looks like today. The third house I want to talk about was the last of the elaborate houses designed by Green & Green, built in Berkeley, California for William Thorson, a lumber baron from Michigan. The interior is paneled in teak, while the living and dining rooms are paneled in mahogany. Here we see the front door. It contains leaded out glass, and it's a bit hard to discern, but in the pattern of a gnarled grapevine. You see that a bit closer. This house is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is a California State Historical Landmark. And then we come to Prairie Style and Frank Lloyd Wright. He worked from 1888 until his death in 1909 and lived through all the changes in design and in fact was at the forefront of a lot of them. His work had its roots in the arts and crafts movement and demonstrated many of the ideals of the movement, which we can still see in his later buildings. We have to mention Falling Water, built between 1936 and 1939. This masterpiece, which you can't put into any category because it's so iconic, but it does reflect many of the ideals of the movement. It demonstrates his use of natural materials, his sense of space, and his wish to remain harmonious with nature. So much so that although the Kaufman family who commissioned the house wanted him to site it where they could look at the waterfall, Wright chose to place the building over the waterfall and almost make it a part of the waterfall. Then we have the Johnson Wax building, which I'm showing mostly to introduce you to the interior of the building, which again isn't arts and crafts, but this wonderful office space recognizes the fact that the working man is also entitled to a dignified space for his working day. However, the finished product may have been a bit more aesthetic than efficient. There's a story that during a downpour, Johnson called Wright to complain that it was raining all over his desk. Wright's reply was typical: "So, move your desk." But some of Wright's houses do fit into the category of arts and crafts. And to repeat, he does fit into more than one category, but one of those categories is what has become known as the prairie style. And this is thought of as one of the most important architectural styles of the arts and crafts movement. And whereas Green and Green were mostly in California and the West, Frank Lloyd Wright was mostly in the Midwest. He wanted to create buildings that reflected the rolling Midwestern prairie in which they were built. As a result, the Prairie House had a predominantly horizontal appearance with a broad overhanging roof. Windows were arranged in horizontal lines and often featured stained glass in distinctive stylized floral or geometric patterns. And the interiors were important as the exteriors. And unlike Green and Green, who used various woods, Wright mostly used oak, which is more typical of arts and crafts furniture. And his houses often featured built-in cabinets, and all the furniture, everything was designed by Wright. And they reflect a style that Wright termed organic architecture. By this, he meant that architecture should be suited to its environment. So this is the Roby House in Oak Park, a suburb of Chicago. That's just the exterior. Then we have the Darwin Martin House in Buffalo, New York. This, it's on the Register of National Historic Landmarks and has been fully restored. Wright was extremely proud of this house and referred to it as his magnum opus. Some of the features of his prairie-style homes are handcrafted stone or woodwork and low-pitched gable roofs and overhanging eaves. Prairie houses were found mostly in the Chicago suburb of Oak Park and in other Chicago suburbs, but also in other Midwestern states. And in these houses, most of the inside features, the light fixtures, the furniture, even the woven textiles, were created for specific spaces in the home. So a strong feature of this arts and crafts movement was that the interiors were as important as the exteriors. And like the Green brothers, Wright designed the furniture, lamps, etc. for the interiors. He even tried to design the clothes for the women would wear. So let's get to the furniture. And we have mission style. It's another term associated with the arts and crafts movement. It's a style of furniture that originated in the late 19th century. It traces its origins and its names to a single chair in 1894 for a church in San Francisco. Gustav Stickley produced arts and crafts furniture often referred to as being in this mission style. This was plain oak furniture that was solid and suggestive of entirely handicrafted work. Though in the case of Stickley, he did use machines and as well as handcrafting items. He was, besides being a furniture manufacturer, he was a publisher and the chief proselytizer for the American craftsman style. He was a radical who published articles by anarchists and other libertarian socialists. And his industrious nature led him and his brothers to form Stickley Brothers, and then later to found the Craftsman Workshop in Binghamton, New York. The Mission style is a style that emphasizes simple horizontal and vertical lines and flat panels that accentuate the grain of the wood. Here we see a piece typical of the original style. White oak, native wood, was among the strongest of woods and was used by many, if not all, arts and crafts designers in America. Here an oak cupboard. His furniture reflects his ideals of simplicity and honesty in construction. And we see basically unadorned surfaces and the addition of hammered metal hardware and bright polished iron or copper. And finally, a low chest also by Stickley. And a sofa with leather seats and dyed leather used for the seats. And a leather armchair, typical Stickley. Stickley also at his Craftsman Workshop also produced metalwork. A lot of them, they didn't just stick to one thing, they produced other products. He founded a metal workshop, mostly working with copper and wrought iron. Harvey Ellis, he worked with Stickley. And although the Stickley Workshop starts off as one distinctive style, it was later influenced by Harvey Ellis, and then the furniture takes on another different style. Here, these are both by Harvey Ellis. He elongated and lightened the pieces with taller proportioned and ornamented with dramatic stylized floral patterns in pewter and copper and colored woods. And in contrast to Stickley, he used more black cherry than oak. A desk and a table, both Harvey Ellis. If you look at the decoration in the middle on the table, perhaps it reminds you a bit of Charles Rennie Mackintosh in Glasgow, if you're familiar with him. I'm not going to go into him, but you might be familiar with him. And then we come to Limbert, Charles Limbert. He was a highly successful and very typical furniture manufacturer of this period. And it's been said if Stickley was Hertz, then Limbert was Avis. He was the son of a cabinet manufacturer and furniture dealer who learned the craft at his father's store in Grand Rapids, Michigan. His logo, which was a very Dutch population up there. He founded the Holland Dutch Arts and Crafts Company in Grand Rapids. And his philosophy was similar to that of the Stickley brothers: maintain high quality in materials and construction whilst utilizing machinery to full advantage. And you can see the similarity to Stickley here, very distinctively an arts and crafts piece. Here we have a table, a Limbert table, a chair, perhaps for style rather than comfort, and two Limbert lamps in copper and brass. And like all these manufacturers, he didn't concentrate, I repeat, solely on one type of product. And a copper and mica lamp, internally lit, supposedly to look like a lighthouse. This jardiniere, it's actually one of his most notable pieces, was included in the 1973 show at the Museum of Art in Princeton. And that was the show that really began the arts and crafts revival, 1973. Limbert's furniture had been chosen for the interior also of the Old Faithful Inn at Yellowstone National Park. And in fact, many of the lodges of the national park have furniture and interiors that you could put into this category, arts and crafts. Then I'm going to go on to functional and decorative objects. We come to Roycroft, perhaps you've heard of them. So we come to Albert Hubbard and Roycroft. Roycroft had a whole workshop and campus in East Aurora, New York, a suburb of Buffalo. He was a fascinating man. At the age of 15 in the 1870s, he went to work selling soap door to door from a horse-drawn wagon in Illinois. 3 years later, he moved to Buffalo to work for the Larkin Soap Company, recently founded by his brother-in-law, John Larkin. This is the Larkin building. Incidentally, it was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, but I'm not going to get into that because it's not really art. It's not arts and crafts. His innovations contributed to the growth of the Larkin Company, and he became a partner. And he eventually sold his interest and became a writer. He went to England. He had a trip to England, a turning point in his life. He hadn't been able to find a publisher for his book, Little Journeys. So he went to visit William Morris, and inspired by Morris's press, Kelmscroft Press, decided to open up his own private press to print the book himself, founding the Roycroft Press. The first artist invited to work at the Roycroft Press was Denslow, W.W. Denslow, the original illustrator of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Hubbard's championing of the arts and crafts approach attracted several visiting craftspeople to East Aurora, and they formed a community of printers, furniture makers, metalsmiths, leathersmiths, and bookbinders, and became known as the Roycrofters. I won't go into where that name comes from. He created a whole working campus in East Aurora. There was, and still is, a chapel, a print shop, a blacksmith shop, a copper shop, a foundry, and most importantly, an inn. Incidentally, the campus is designated a National Historic Landmark and open to visitors. Here are a few examples of products from the Roycroft workshop. A copper box, bookends with the owl eyes, a hanging lamp from the Roycroft Chapel, and a high table, a more complex creation. And finally, a book from the Roycroft Press. In 1915, Hubbard and his wife set sail for a European vacation. Sadly, they had chosen the Lusitania, and Hubbard died with his wife Alice when the ship was torpedoed. His son kept the Roycroft campus going until the Depression, and then it went into decline. But today it's been revived, and most outstanding is the inn, which has been renovated beautifully and is definitely a place worth visiting if you are interested in arts and crafts. This is the interior, it's a hotel, and it's done entirely, even all the bedrooms, in the arts and crafts style, really fascinating. And it's in the Buffalo area, near two wonderful Frank Lloyd Wright houses, the Martin House, which I talked about, and another one called Greycliff, a National Historic Monument on Lake Erie, recently renovated. Then let's go to art pottery. Another important feature of the movement are the many ceramic factories and small groups of workers that grew up in America. In this field, women were a particularly important factor. And just to reiterate again, it's not a specific style that we're looking at. What characterized art? Okay, so we'll see that lots of variety in the creations of ceramics and pottery. And I'll mention some of the best known names that you may come across in antique shows or stores or museums. But let me start by talking about two groups of potters that very much exemplify the social aims of the arts and crafts movement. First, we have the Saturday Evening Girls. This movement shows the combination of craftsmanship and social goals that lay at the heart of the arts and crafts movement. The pottery story begins with the establishment of a club called the Saturday Evening Girls, which operated out of the North End branch of the Boston Public Library. Living conditions in the immigrant North End of Boston at the turn of the century were really bad. The tenements into which the neighborhood's residents crowded were old and dilapidated. The North End was by far the most congested district in the city. So it was with a view to enriching the lives of the young women of the neighborhood that the Saturday Evening Girls Club was established. The goal was to furnish constructive after-hour activities for the daughters of the district's mostly Jewish and Italian immigrant families. What was initially an opportunity to enhance the lives of these inner city girls soon morphed into a successful pottery workshop called the Paul Revere Pottery. And what makes the story of the Paul Revere Pottery especially interesting were the superior working conditions that prevailed there at the time, when the daughters of immigrants often labored in sweatshops for extremely low wages. And while the women were working, the works of Dickens, Shakespeare, and other great authors were read aloud to them. Wages and benefits were also much better than those available in factories, and the workday at the pottery never exceeded 8 hours. The wares often had a fairly simple floral design and a polychrome glaze. Again, demonstrating the rather simple designs. And another bowl from the Saturday Evening Girls. Marblehead was another workshop where women were the predominant creators. They were the Saturday Evening Girls weren't the only group to benefit from the use of pottery to deal with social issues. Herbert Hall established a medical practice in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and as his practice developed, he became interested in the problem of patients with, as he called it, nervous disorders. He opened a therapeutic workshop in Marblehead, and among the crafts that were promoted were weaving, wood carving, metalwork, and pottery. Initially, the pottery program was part of a therapy program, but later the pottery was separated from the sanatorium and it began a production on a larger scale. Most of the products were, again, simple in design, typical arts and crafts works. If you saw them, you'd definitely be able to say, oh, arts and crafts. And then we come to the Newcomb pottery. This was made at Sophie Newcomb College in New Orleans, which is now part of Tulane. And the stated purpose there was to train young women in a marketable and respectable skill. Blues and greens and natural colors predominated in Newcomb designs, and typical plants of the American South, such as tobacco and cotton, were often featured. We have 2 more Newcomb designs. The pottery began to market its wares about 1895, and it received international acclaim at the Paris Expo of 1900. Few more Newcomb designs. Our student artists signed their work and funded their tuition by selling their products. And Newcomb pottery is still highly valued. Just very briefly mention some of the other potteries that were part of the American arts and crafts movement. One of the most important art potteries in North America was the Rookwood pottery of Cincinnati. And they used a different motif. The typical American Indians were common in their work. Also a tiger motif, a floral motif, and then we have Tico. Their goal was to develop a sophisticated product which was still affordable to the public at large. Mostly soft greens they used, and these are typical Tico products. And then we come to this guy, the Mad Potter of Biloxi. And among the most iconic, or maybe you could say eccentric designers, he was credited with having extraordinary skill, apparently, to construct this. Earthenware vessels with eggshell-thin walls made of fine porcelain, twisting, crinkling, folding, whatever. He crushed them before applying one of his bizarre glazes. And his actually creations are quite sought after. Lastly, we come to Gruby, was another pottery in Massachusetts. They pioneered the application of a matte glaze and subdued decoration. And Tiffany used wide-mouthed Gruby vases as a base for many of their lamps. Tiffany, like Frank Lloyd Wright, can't be put into any one specific category. In fact, he's a whole subject in himself. So I'm only going to touch on him very briefly here. I think we can suggest, though, that he was influenced by the philosophy of the arts and crafts movement. The glass method he used, one of them was known as Favril glass. Favril is an Old English word meaning handmade. Here we have some other Tiffany beautiful designs in Favril glass. And many of Tiffany's lamps were on a bronze base. So how about arts and crafts today? Before ending, I just want to talk about where in addition you can see arts and crafts examples today. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Grove Park Inn in Asheville, North Carolina. It opened in 1913 as a hotel, designed in the arts and crafts style. It was hailed at the time as the finest resort hotel in the world, illuminated with hundreds of Roycroft lighting fixtures and furnished with Roycroft oak furniture. The Grove Park Inn was, and still is, a highlight for arts and crafts enthusiasts. There is an annual arts and crafts conference and show every year in February. I don't know about this year. I think there's something online in this month. And a contemporary craft show of articles that are being made now in the arts and crafts style. Fabulous things. Also, as I mentioned, several of the lodges in the national park have arts and crafts interiors. And then I'll mention again the Roycroft Inn and campus in East Aurora, which, as I said, is designed as a National Historic Landmark. It contains 9 of the original structures from Hubbard's time, the campus, including the inn, the chapel, the print shop, the furniture shop, and the copper shop, all of which are open to visitors. So, finished. I hope this has given you some idea of what the arts and crafts movement was all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Please ask Jack to unshare the screen.
Unshare the screen.
Yeah, unshare the screen. And
Hello.
And I want to suggest that our members change your view from speaker to gallery. And that way you'll be able to see everybody, which is fun because we have more than 31 screens here. So switch to gallery and you'll see lots of your friends and neighbors. So Elaine, let's open it for a few minutes of questions and answers. Let's see what people have to say. If you'd like to ask a question, don't forget to unmute yourself. And we're going to just, since there's 30 of us, let's just try you sort of wave your hand at me, okay? And the first person I saw was Harriet Bergman. Go ahead, Harriet. Let's see, we need just a second.
I unmute, no, I am unmuted.
Very good. Very
good. We inherited a whole lot of arts and crafts, furniture and items, everything from a settle to, several stickly pieces, little rondo tables. And I wonder, first of all, whether or not we're taking care of them well enough. And second of all, what should we have them evaluated? How should we think about them? Right now, they are the furniture in our house, or a lot of it.
Yeah, well, by taking care of them, you just use furniture, give them some nice furniture polish. Yes, you can have them evaluated. There's so many different prices. There's what you would get in an auction, what a dealer would give you. You can do a bit of research online and get some information from there. The auctions, and funnily, you probably not really want to get rid of them now, but all the things that are not doing very well during this time, auction houses have suddenly come into business, and they're doing quite well.
Right.
So you can do some research online and get an idea. If you were
Good.
really serious about it, then you could, if selling it, you could find a dealer who deals in arts.
Right now, it would denude our house.
Right.
Do you,
But it's nice to know what it's worth.
do you have humidification?
Hmm?
We have a question from Norman too.
Yeah, wondering if she has humidification. Number one,
Oh,
care of
What do we
furniture.
have? Not great. Ordinary.
Okay, so that's important, Norman?
Well, it's the first place to start.
Okay, good.
Good.
interesting.
And you'll feel better too.
Yes. Thank you, Norman.
Yeah, I just put one in the office here at Home Haven. I just put this tiny little humidifier in the office
Gotcha.
just yesterday. The next question is from Carrie Snyder. Carrie, please unmute.
As a member of the Activities Committee, I would like to say this was just wonderful. And as we look towards the end of this pandemic and resuming trips again, I would like to ask if you would lead an expedition to the Roycroft Inn in East Aurora for our most ambitious expedition ever from Home Haven.
Oh, it's a long way. It's a long way away, but it's Buffalo. We did a tour of a Rhodes Scholar tour in Buffalo of not just of arts and crafts, but of the architecture there. It's a fascinating city. I mean, from the layout of the city and all sorts. Tiffany, there's all sorts of stuff there. It's a great place to go. It's not somewhere we can go for a day trip.
Oh no, I used to work in Rochester. I know exactly how far it is.
Oh, okay, really?
I think it would be a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, it would be fantastic.
A weekend away. Oh my.
Yeah, it's yeah.
With all of you?
I'll have to check our liability insurance on that one.
Trish,
But Rhodes Scholar was doing a trip, a very, very good trip in that area.
Trish had a question in the chat. Are there any books you would recommend that give a good overview of the American movement?
Oh, I have to put it online. I have a lot of books downstairs. I can't say specifically now. I can put some online of books. Yeah, I have. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you.
you guys can hook up
I-
with it.
I would recommend the catalog from 1969.
Catalog of what?
That was the show at the Princeton.
Right.
That catalog is perfect.
Oh, fantastic. You obviously know a lot about this topic. Yes. Thank you.
Norman is a woodworker, a furniture maker,
right.
woodworker. Norman is, am I right? Crafts person.
Carol Nardini had a question too.
It's not a question, but taking a road trip, Road Scholar will put together a customized trip for at least 10 people. So Road Scholar would assume the liability.
Ooh.
Oh, it'd be fantastic.
A bunch of us did it to go bike and barging in Amsterdam,
Wow.
and it was wonderful. And again, they put it all together. And for those of us who have been on Road Scholar trips, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm planning to go on a Road Scholar trip, if all is well, in September. I'm going to go cycling in Idaho.
Oh, wow.
And do that. And then in looking ahead to 2022, I'm going on a volunteer opportunity to work at a school on an Indian reservation.
Oh my goodness.
So, and the trip in Idaho will be like my 8th Road Scholar trip.
Wow.
I can't say enough. And they're wonderful for the solo traveler,
Yeah.
as well as couples and groups. So.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Carol. You're an inspiration. And I will be in touch with you because I think I'd love to have some input from you for some things that we might be planning. So thank-
Absolutely.
Thank you, Carol. And Carol's involved in
Absolutely.
we have a new hiking group, and Carol's active in that group too. I just wanted to share with you, Elaine, that we have a very nice thank you from a member who had to leave because she had to go off to something else. But Prish Pierce made a point of saying, lovely talk, many thanks, Elaine. So I wanted you to make sure you got that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Please. put
Thank
your-
you very much.
Thank
and-
you.
Okay, I just saw
Pat.
Pat Allen, go ahead.
Hi, Elaine. This was fascinating. I spent many years in Berkeley, and the Berkeley Hills seem to have a lot of this arts and craft buildings in the homes. You mentioned the shingles, and many homes had shingles. But looking at some of the interior pictures that you showed, I thought, oh, I knew somebody who lived in a house like that and a house like that. And I guess I just never thought of it as a particular period. It was just, these were lovely old homes that used a lot of wood.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so interesting that you talked more about it in the East Coast, but I saw much evidence of it on the West Coast.
Well, the green and green was all on the West Coast. The more luxurious arts and crafts were on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New Haven has a pretty good collection of very, very good arts and crafts houses.
Where are they?
But the best one is on Whitney Avenue. I don't remember the address, but it you can see it from the outside. I think it's stucco and dark green, and the inside is superb, absolutely superb.
Interesting.
We could start with a tour of the arts and crafts homes in the New Haven area
A
and then
walkabout.
move out to Buffalo.
The actually, if I don't know if you're familiar with New Haven Country Club, that is the interior of there is arts and crafts, and it is really amazing. Yeah, the New
That's
Haven
beautiful.
Country Club in off Whitney Avenue.
It's beautiful.
Patty,
Patty?
Elaine, you have a question?
Patty, please
Unmute,
unmute.
Patty, unmute.
No, Patty, you're still mute. There you go. Good.
Just press the space bar, you'll unmute.
I'm asking about silversmiths in the arts and crafts period.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I didn't. They seem to be using more copper and in that period than silver because they wanted to make it more accessible to everybody. And I'm not so familiar with silver. I can look in my books and see, but I'm not at this point. Silver seemed to be less used than copper and brass and mica. Yeah.
Jensen
Thank
in
you.
Copenhagen.
Pardon?
We had George Jensen in Copenhagen.
Yes, I'm not sure whether he would fall in. Would you think in the arts and crafts count any of his stuff? I'm not
Early stuff, yep.
early stuff. Okay.
Rick?
Elaine, could you give a little picture of your background of where all this knowledge came from?
Well, at a certain point, I became an antique stealer, and I got very interested in all this stuff, and I got very interested in Art Nouveau and Art Deco, and I've actually given talks on that. I think I just became, when I was in the antique stealer, I wanted to go a little further and understand where it was all coming from. So I just, before that, I was in psychology. Yeah, but
You were an antique dealer.
yeah, and I was doing shows, and it originated. We were in London for a year, and I took a course on, I can't even remember, something in that field, and that's what got me interested in all of that. So yeah, I was doing shows, and I was showing. I had some location. I was in various locations.
Yeah.
It was just an interest I've got.
When did you move to the States?
We moved to the States in we first came in 1964 for a year, Then we went back. When did we come permanently? About 1967. So 66. So I think you can say we're American.
We too.
A long time. We've been here a long time. In New Haven, in the same house.
Do we have more questions? Any more questions? Okay.
Wonderful, Elaine.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Elaine, thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for
Absolutely
sitting
lovely.
through it. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank
Before
you.